All right, so I moved to Albuquerque just kind of off the fly. It was like I was saying in the last video, it was just time for a change in life, really. And yeah, everything kind of fell into place pretty quick with a job and, places to live. I lived in the bottom of a clothing store for a couple weeks. I ended up getting my own apartment for a little bit with a girlfriend. And then, ended up moving into a house. But everything kind of, had a band too. And then I ended up having more bands a little bit later in my time living there. But anyway, so I do remember very specifically within the first couple weeks living there. Um, and I had brought like a guitar amp, bag of clothes, some tapes, Nirvana tapes I had with me. Um, so of course, to me, a topic of conversation was Nirvana because I'm seeing like, it's exciting, it's exciting that your favorite band, friends of yours are doing really well. So anyway, however the conversations were, um, I remember going into a local corner store there. So there was like a local corner store that, whatever I'd get, snacks or whatever. I remember going into the store and walking by the magazines, and there was probably four magazines that had Nirvana on the cover. And I think one was Spin, if I remember right. But there was, you know, those guys were plastered on these magazines, these new like music magazines, and I remember that really hit me. Um, like what the fuck? And I was in this band for a little while, and I remember the bass player singer came back from, he was at this club called Beyond Ordinary, and he came to band practice, and he comes in and it was like, oh my god, oh my god. I was just at Beyond Ordinary, and they had like a DJ there or something, and he said that Smells Like Teen Spirit came on, and everybody in the whole place just rushed to like the floor and were going crazy. And he said he'd never seen anything like it. And I'm standing there. Again, I tried to explain it in the last video that for Nirvana, a lot was word of mouth. Unless you had MTV and you listened to the radio, it's kind of like that's how that's how hype traveled. So obviously it traveled very fast with Smells Like Teen Spirit getting played probably constantly at that point, but it was still kind of like everything was kind of a surprise. Like for me, I was experiencing it day to day. And I don't remember my conversations with Chris, but I was in contact with Chris and I called him. Though one thing I want to express, that long distance phone calls back then cost money. So even being on the phone with somebody for 5 minutes, I don't remember how much it was a minute. You could probably look it up, but it adds up. And so I would have to have a place to call from, some way to pay the person. I remember like when I worked at Fred's Bread and Bagel, I would make phone calls from Fred's Bread and Bagel once in a while. But anyway, Chris was somebody that I kept in contact with. Partly just because there was excitement. You know, when I could get him on the phone, it'd be like, wow, you know, I heard this or saw this, but a lot of the time those guys weren't at home, you know. I mean, really, from freaking the minute they put out Nevermind until the day Kurt died, you know, if you look at all the shows they played and everywhere they went, there was sporadic times, you know, where they were around, but they're, you know, a lot of the time they were busy playing shows. I think probably after Francis was born, there was probably like, you know, more groups of months, a few months here and there, that they weren't, you know, as busy, right? Anyway, it's just so weird. It's like times were really different when it comes to communication. You know, like now, for all of you that grew up in the last like 24 years, I mean, man, communication, you go back to the, you know, 90s, 80s, different world, man. Different world completely. You know, communication is just, meaning like communication, everything you can get on your phone, right? It just didn't exist like that, you know? Making one phone call cost money, and you had to make sure you had that money, right? Or you could use that's right, you could use a payphone. So you'd have enough quarters, you'd use quarters. And if I had like, you know, $2 in quarters, I would be able to usually talk on the phone long enough to get a phone call through. But then also on that note, it's like what you talk about is important, right? You're talking for how many minutes? Like, it was probably 8 minutes or something, you know? I mean, maybe it was like a quarter a minute or something, right? Really. So, you know, you had to be selective on what you even wanted to talk about. Anyway, I can remember like a couple specific phone calls when I worked at Fred's Bread and Bagels. I would clean up tables after everybody was gone. I had a dishwashing job, and then I would clean the tables. And I could play any music I wanted to, any CD. And I had brought my copy of Nevermind. And I would fucking just crank it. And of course, like, I think there were people that stayed after just to, like, you know, hear it cranked sometimes, you know, because I would, like, every night. I'd probably play it twice. But the first time that I played it all the way through, so I'm working, and whatever the last song is Something in the Way or something. Anyway, so it ends, and I didn't know about the secret song. Like, those guys didn't tell anybody about that. But on my CD, it went on for, I don't know, was it 14 minutes or something? And then Endless Nameless would start. And I remember, like, I was, you know, cleaning tables, and I had it cranked loud. I mean, that stereo was loud. And I remember it came on. Like, the CD was done, I'm cleaning, and then Endless Nameless came on, and I was like, whoa, fuck, what the fuck? And I literally, I remember just like stopping and sitting down, and but I was familiar with hearing it, because they did play that, I'm pretty sure, at the Paramount. But still, like, it didn't really click that it was the same song until, you know, like, I had heard that. But at that moment, I'm like hearing this Nirvana song I've never heard recorded before, ever. So I'm like really tripping out. And I called Chris probably the next day. And I asked him about that, and he was like, "Oh yeah, that's the secret song, you know, did you like that song?" Or, you know, whatever. So we had the conversation. And that was pretty amazing. That was pretty genius, you know, of a band to do that. And it's not on every CD. Somebody had got into it with me when I had talked about this before, and they said, that wasn't on the first, first copies of the CD or whatever. And no, it was. I had one of the first copies that anybody had from the Rebar. What box it came out of, I don't know. Maybe the first actual release of Nevermind that you could buy in a store didn't have Endless Nameless on it. I've never really researched that, but mine did. Now, at one point working at Fred's Bread and Bagel, the restaurant got broken into, and somebody took one of the garbage cans, took all of the CDs, stole every CD, and they stole other shit. But anyway, yeah, that's what happened to my copy. It got stolen with every CD at Fred's Bread and Bagel. So anyway, let's see, anything else? I remember running into a guy at a party, and he started like, I don't know, we were just like, I don't even know if I was talking to him when I heard him like just talk about how much, how lame he thought Nirvana was, and he thought they sucked, and I'm like, I had to say something. I'm like, why would you say, what, So I remember like kind of getting into it, and I think he was calling them posers or something, and I'm like, so I had to like teach him a little bit about the band, and I remember him kind of like realizing I wasn't bullshitting, I wasn't lying, I was from Tacoma, and I mean, those guys are friends, and they work hard as a band, and they are from the early scene, whatever. Anyway, anything else I can remember? I do remember that at that point living in Albuquerque, so between like December and January, oh yeah, somebody told me that the album went to #1 on Billboard, and of course back then that was like, anybody that's been in bands and in the music, that's a big freaking deal. So that happened around the end of December, the beginning of January, and I remember like hearing that. I think it was the same friend that I was in a band with. He told me that. Remember, like being dislocated from everything besides your job and my guitar, and and the people I mean, that's basically what life was like. I'd go about life, go to work, come home, usually play music or have like a band. I had a girlfriend, off and on, or early on there. So, I mean, just like, so I was always interested. I want to know, the only way I could really find out what was going on is either call Chris, but I wasn't calling Chris constantly, I mean, I like call him once in a while, and he wasn't that easy to get a hold of. Anyway, yeah, let's see. At one point, Chris told me that they were playing in Phoenix with like Pearl Jam. They were on tour, going to be on tour with Red Hot Chili Peppers. So Chris said, if you can make it out there, let me know, and I'll put you on the list. Or we'll put you on the list, or whatever. So I was all over that, of course. So whatever show that was, it was in Phoenix or Mesa, Arizona. I think it was in, anyway, it was basically Phoenix, and it was Pearl Jam, Nirvana, and then the Red Hot Chili Peppers. And I invited one of the friends that I first moved out there and stayed with for a couple weeks. So friend Anna went, and then two girls, I don't remember their names, but they were friends with my girlfriend, and they went. I should ask the ex-girlfriend and find out who they were. It would be interesting to see what their memories were. So we all go out there for that show and get into the show. I had an all access pass. I think I was the only person that had an all access pass. Yeah, I was the only person that had the all access pass out of us four. Though I think I got Anna backstage, and possibly we got some food. We were able to get some food. But I went back to Nirvana's room, and that was weird. That was bizarre. So I'm thinking this is in 1992. I'm almost positive. That's like probably for sure. I don't remember what month exactly. We'd have to look that up. And so that was kind of strange because it was this room, and I remember Kurt was reading this magazine that had to do with like blues art, like old blues artists from the South or whatever. And Courtney was kind of like kneeling right next to Kurt. Kurt was sitting in a chair. And I went over and said hi to him, and then he introduced me to Courtney again, and that's when I realized I was like, I was saying in the last video that I had met Courtney at, but we didn't talk or anything. That was it. That's actually the only times that I ever met Courtney, and that was it. It was just kind of like, oh hi, nice to meet you, whatever, and stayed back there for probably like a half hour. And at one point I was just kind of sitting against the wall talking to somebody next to me. So we're in Nirvana's, like, I guess you'd call it waiting room. It didn't really seem like a dressing room. It was just kind of like a big open room. I think there was some food and drinks in there, so I, ate a little bit, and I do remember that. We're sitting there, and then the guy shows up. He's like, okay, you guys are on in 2 minutes, come on out. So I walked out with, I remember this was like one of the most surreal memories with Nirvana, or seeing Nirvana, because I walked out with Kurt and Chris, and I'm walking with, like, next to Kurt, and we're talking for a minute, like really like normally, like it was like, I don't even remember what we were talking about. I was like, wow, you guys are, something to the lines, I would guess, like, you guys are playing the Coliseum. This is crazy, whatever. And then they went on stage, and the crowd freaks out, and I go into the crowd, and then I watch him play, and it was Nirvana playing a arena rock show, and again it was kind of like, I already missed this small. I know it probably sounds so bad because, I'm like spoiled from seeing like the smaller Nirvana shows, which were freaking amazing, man, absolutely. But it was cool to see him. It just was, again, it was like dislocated from really the experience of watching the band, to me, But I remember Pearl Jam played before that, and I remember like peeking in, listening. And I was like, "What was this?" You know. I mean, I was familiar. I knew a couple of the members that they were what bands they were in with Mother Love Bone and whatever, but just was like, man, these guys are not going to do very well. That's was my honest. You know, I was like, you hear about 10 and Pearl Jam, but at that point they hadn't really gotten that big. And I couldn't even imagine. I mean, personally, I was like, well, it doesn't look like these guys are going to do very well. I mean, that's how I felt. And Red Hot Chili Peppers, they were pretty freaking good though. I remember like watching them play, and they were amazing live. So yeah. I don't know. There's more Albuquerque related memories related to Nirvana. I definitely was again. I was in contact with Chris, and I wanted to get in contact with Kurt, but it was always like there just wasn't. You know, it was more like Chris was always like, wow, well, I don't even talk to him very much unless we're, you know, practicing or playing shows or whatever, you know. It was just like, again, a dislocation for those guys. It's interesting to think like, you know, when those guys weren't on tour or practicing, they were going about probably very separate lives. I don't know much about what Dave was doing back then, but you know, their lives were. I think Dave had a recording studio though, so he probably was, you know, recording music, and be interested to know how much Nirvana actually did record in Dave's studio. I know they recorded a couple songs. Yeah. Anyway, all right, we'll call that the end. Hopefully, this recorded the whole thing. Thank you for listening.